All right, reporting in three, two, and one.
Okay, series only has three. But other than that, it's pretty damn close.
Wait, wait, go back. Your mic cut out again.
You're shitting
I
me.
couldn't hear any. So I'm not cutting any of this. Do your stab
The
again. Do your stab again.
book has four states, and the TV series only has three. But it's pretty damn close.
Perfect. Welcome to episode 244 of Nerdery Murdering.
Big 244. I'm Zig with your nerdery.
And I'm Jeffrey with your murder. Welcome to another week of the highs and lows, the ups, the down, the good and the bad, and the nerd and the murd. Um, I've talked that I golf a lot now. Last week for us was still actually a whole week ago was the New Year's Eve week, and I had a lot of time off. Chuck and I golfed 18 holes 4 days in a row. I have no idea how pros do that week in and week out. I was whipped. I can't believe how tiring that gets. But I had to share that. So Chuck was with me. We tried to golf again on the following Sunday, and we were both just like, no, no, can't do it. So thanks, Chuck. Thanks for the 4 days of golfing, but man, never again. I'll never do that again. Um, Book two in the Prime Numbers universe is complete. I am editing currently. As of this morning, I am through 30 chapters of edit. I hope to finish it today and then start some beta readers and then go to publisher. So going quick on this, I was very, very excited. Um, Book two is an emotional journey. It's a lot of high emotion in book two. A lot of things happen in it, and it proceeds right into book three. So the story is not over; it continues. There's a lot going on. So I'm very, very excited. I just wanted to highlight that for those who have picked up Prime numbers and enjoyed it, and know that it does end with an opening for book two. Book two is complete. I'm not revealing the title yet, as there are still people reading it, and the title itself is a little bit of a spoiler. So, leaving that alone. Zig is on his third draft of
Yeah,
his
you just
book.
finished my third draft. I'm starting on my fourth here pretty soon.
Can we say its name?
Yeah, sure.
Uh,
Fireside.
Fireside Chronicle. I just finished reviewing his third draft yesterday. It's very good.
Oh, thanks.
He's done a lot with it. I gave some what I thought were small, minor opportunities. I didn't see a whole lot. I thought that you really expanded that world a lot.
Thank you.
Really did a lot with it. Very, very enjoyable. So I'm excited for that. So hopefully Zig will be done with that soon and we can have another announcement.
Yes.
So you got anything for us? Are you ready to step over to the nerdery side of the house?
Played yesterday. Me and some of the nerds got together and played both a Risk game and a Castle Risk game. Our friend Johnny has Risk on both sides. Johnny's also the person that came up with the murder, so
Mm,
we need to thank him for that.
thank you,
Although he
Johnny.
says it a little different. He says murder.
Mm, mm.
But I kind of riffed on the way he said that. Um, but yeah, we played Risk and Castle Risk. I gotta say, those games are awesome. If you can find a copy with the two games in one, but they're kind of hard to come by now, but pick it up. It's a great game. Uh,
No.
Jeffrey's like, we did adjust one of the continent rules. We gave Europe six and North America four, and that seemed to balance the game out a little better.
That changes a lot of fundamentals of that game. I mean,
All
the
we did,
reason America is worth so much is because it's so hard to take and hold.
but it's not hard to hold. It only has three ingress points. That
It's
was the point.
still very hard to take and hold. That's interesting.
Yeah,
That's very interesting.
it changed so it made the game way more balanced. Because
Hmm.
the whole idea was you take and hold America for three turns and you could basically win the game. Well, if you're only getting and it's only one less army,
Hmm.
but Europe is easier to take but much harder to hold because it has so many ingress points. So we gave that army extra army to Europe, and again, it made the game run a
Hmm.
little better.
Hmm. Well, I hate the game, so I don't care. Whatever. You do what you want. I hate that
Yeah,
game.
right on. But it was a lot of fun, so I would recommend it to anybody. Uh, as long as you haven't been traumatized by playing with certain people.
Yep.
Uh, so today we're going to talk about The Man in the High Castle.
Cool.
We're going to talk about the PKD novel and the television series that ran on Amazon. Um, The Man in the High Castle is an alternate history novel by Philip K. Dick, first published in 1962, which imagines a world in which the Axis powers won World War II. The story occurs in 1962, 15 years after the end of the war in 1947, which is, wrong, but and depicts the life of several characters living under Imperial Japan or Nazi Germany. As they rule a partitioned United States, the eponymous character is the mysterious author of a novel within the novel entitled The Grasshopper Lies Heavy, a subversive alternate history of the war in which the Allied powers are victorious. Um, what is really cool about this is the story in The Grasshopper Lies Heavy is not our world. It's different. It is a different history than what actually happened. I'll get into that a little bit because it's a little freaky because you're reading it's like, wait, that's not right. Wait, oh no, they're not talking about us, our universe. They're talking about some other universe. Um, Dick's thematic inspiration include the alternate history of the American Civil War called the Bring on the Jubilee, which was released in 1953 by Ward Moore, and the I Ching, a Chinese book of divinations that features in the story and actions of the other characters. The Man in the High Castle won the Hugo Award for Best Novel in 1963 and was adapted to television for Amazon Prime as The Man in the High Castle in 2015. In the alternate history imagined in The Man in the High Castle, Giuseppe Zangara, this is the actual history of what's going on, not the Grasshopper Lies Heavy. I'll get to that too. Giuseppe Zangara assassinates President-elect Franklin Delano Roosevelt in 1933, resulting in the continuation of the Great Depression and the policy of the United States non-interventionism at the start of World War II in 1939. American inactions allow Nazi Germany to conquer and annex continental Europe and the Soviet Union into the Reich. The extermination of the Jews and the Romani, the Jehovah's Witnesses, and the Slavs, and all other peoples whom the Nazis consider subhuman ensues. The Axis powers then jointly conquer Africa and still compete for the control of South America in 1962. Imperial Japan won the war in the Pacific and invaded the west coast of the United States, while Nazi Germany invaded the east coast. The surrender of the Allies ended World War II in 1947. By 1962, Imperial Japan and Nazi Germany are the world superpowers fighting a geopolitical Cold War over the world, and in particular over the former United States and South America. Japan extended the Co-Prosperity Pacific Alliance with the establishment of the Pacific States of America, or the PSA, and the politically neutral Rocky Mountain states acting as a buffer against the Nazi territory to the east. Nazi North America is composed of two countries, the South and the northeastern part of the former contiguous United States of America, which is referred to as the U.S. In the book, both of which are ruled by collaborationist pro-Nazi puppet regimes, Canada remains an independent country, which is not entirely true. I have pulled up a map. There's a little bit wrong with it, or it needs a little bit of cleaning up. So I think I've even included a pretty accurate map of how Philip K. Dick saw it. Quebec is part of Vichy France, which is a collaborationist French government. There's the central section of Canada where most of the cities that we think of, Toronto and all that stuff, are basically a free state, but they're fairly poor because nobody kind of deals with them. There is a central section of America which basically runs from the Mississippi to the uh, Rocky Mountains, which is free America. Um, in the television series, that's a much smaller section, um, and it's there's just one America or one eastern part of America, which is a puppet regime instead of two, and the it's there's a bigger central section that is the Rocky Mountain states or the ungoverned part of America. Um, the aged Adolf Hitler is incapacitated by tertiary syphilis. Martin Bormann is the acting chancellor of Germany, and many high-ranking Nazi leaders, Joseph Goebbels, Reinhard Heydrich, Hermann Goring, and Arthur Sayes Inquart, still survive and vie to succeed Hitler as the Führer of the Greater Germanic Reich. Technologically, the Nazis have drained the Mediterranean Sea for Lebensraum and farmland, developed and used the hydrogen bomb, developed rockets for traveling throughout the world and into outer space, and have undertaken colonization missions to the moon and the planets Venus and Mars. Now, in 1962, it has been 15 years since Imperial Japan, Nazi Germany, won World War II. In San Francisco, the Pacific States of America, Japanese judicial racism has enslaved Black people and reduced the Chinese residents to second-class citizens. Businessman Robert Childen owns the antique shop there that specializes in Americana for a Japanese clientele who is obsessed with cultural artifacts of the former United States. They carry this over into the television series quite a bit. The Japanese are just enamored with 1930s and 1920s Americana. It drives them crazy. One day, Childen receives a request from Nobusuke Tagomi, a high-ranking trade official who seeks a gift to impress a Swedish industrialist named Baines. Childen cannot fulfill Tagomi's original request, a Civil War recruitment poster, but is able to present alternatives because he is well stocked with counterfeit antiques made by the metalworks Wyndham Matson Corporation. Recently fired from his job at Wyndham Matson factory, Frank Frink, formerly Frank Fink, is a secret Jew and war veteran who agrees to join a former co-worker to start a business making and selling jewelry. In the Rocky Mountain states, Frank's ex-wife, Juliana Frink, works as a judo instructor in Cannon City, Colorado. And in her private life has begun a sexual relationship with Joe Cinadella, an Italian truck driver and ex-soldier. Several characters in the novel, The Man in the High Castle, read a popular novel, The Grasshopper Lies Heavy, by Hawthorne Amundsen, the title of which the readers presume derives from the Bible verse fragment, The grasshopper shall be a burden, Ecclesiastes, as an alternate history of the Second World War, wherein the Allies defeat the Axis powers. The Nazi regime bans The Grasshopper Lies Heavy in the South, whereas the Pacific States of America allow the publication and sale of counterfactual novel. Because the Japanese look at it and see it's a fairy story. It gives them something to strive for. The Grasshopper Lies Heavy postulates that President Roosevelt survived the 1933 assassination attempt, but chose not to seek re-election in 1940. So again, this differs from our history as well. The next president, Rexford Tugwell, moves the American Pacific Fleet from Pearl Harbor, which we did not do, saving it from attack by the Imperial Japanese Navy, which it sees the country is better equipped to fight the war, having retained most of their military industrial capabilities. The United Kingdom contributes more to the Allied war effort, which facilitates the defeat of Erwin Rommel in the North African campaign, which did happen. The British fight the Axis armies through the Caucasus to join the Soviet Union to defeat the Nazis in the Battle of Stalingrad, which did not happen. And the Kingdom of Italy reneges its membership in the Axis and betrays the Nazis. Also actually happened. The British Army joins the Red Army in the Battle of Berlin. Didn't happen. The decisive defeat of Nazi Germany at war's end in 1945. Hitler and the Nazi leaders are tried as war criminals. Didn't happen. And are put to death. Didn't happen. Hitler killed himself. with Hitler's last words being "Deutsch ersten ich," Germans here I stand, in imitation of Martin Luther. After the war, Tugwell promulgates the New Deal for the countries of the world, which financed a decade of rebuilding in China and the education of illiterate peoples in the underdeveloped countries of Africa and Asia, who receive television sets by which they are taught to read and write, are instructed in digging wells and in purifying water. The New Deal finances assistance to facilitate American businesses building factories into the underdeveloped countries of Asia and Africa. Also, really didn't happen. American society is peaceful and harmonious. It is at peace with the other countries of the world. The war ends. The Soviet Union, 10 years after the war, still headed by Winston Churchill, the British Empire becomes militaristic, anti-American, and establishes prison camps in India for Chinese subjects considered disloyal. Also didn't happen. Suspecting the United States is sponsoring the anti-colonial subversion of British colonial rule in Asia, Churchill provokes a Cold War for global hegemony. The geopolitical rivalry leads to an Anglo-American war won by the British. Again, in the novel, the the grasshopper lies heavy. It is different from our history in many aspects, but the same in many others. Um,
Well, and you kept saying didn't happen, and I hated to stop you, but I think our listeners know that didn't happen. That's not how
I
our
get it.
life
Yeah,
is right now.
yeah, I know.
We
Didn't
would know
happen.
if that
Did
didn't
happen.
happen.
Didn't happen. Well,
Um,
if you were
in
keeping score, some of it happened, some of it didn't.
Okay,
But in that novel, it's different from our history, so it lends to this science fiction idea that there are alternate histories going
yes,
on and
yes.
they are connected, um, which they explore, in my opinion, they explore better in the television series because you kind of see how he's getting it. Like the company that builds the replicas, Wyndham Matson, um, they're getting stuff from another. They're getting stuff from another dimension.
Hmm.
Yeah, because you're looking at it, it's like, how did they make this so realistic? They didn't. They just bought it and slapped a different name on it and sold it in a different dimension. So, and that kind of ties into the novel writer, how he's able to get away with the stuff that he's doing is because he's 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 part of the import market. Um, the television series deals with that a little differently. You get to see how they're jumping between worlds um, later on in the series, but it opens very similarly. The television series, it is a parallel universe where the Axis powers of Nazi Germany and the Empire of Japan rule the world after the victory of World War II. It was created by Frank Spotnitz and produced by Amazon Studios. Ridley Scott's Scott-free production with Scott serving as executive producer. I'm kind of glad they had Ridley Scott on it. Headline Pictures, Electric Shepherd Productions, and Big Light Productions. It is based on the Philip K. Dick novel. It premiered in January of 2015, and Amazon ordered a 10-episode season the following month, which was released in November. A second season of 10 episodes premiered in 2016 in December, and a third was released on October 5th, 2018. The fourth and final season premiered on November 15th, 2019. So it also is set in 1962. The series' main setting is parallel universe. In 1946, after Giuseppe Zangara assassinated the president-elect of the United States, Franklin D. Roosevelt, in 1933, uh, or the Axis powers won in 1946, as opposed to 1947 in the novel. Again, you know, World War II ended in 1945 for us. Um, but because we weren't we didn't have rat lines getting their scientists over here, the Germans were able to secure a nuclear weapon, and they dropped it on Washington, D.C. Well, I say dropped it, I think they planted it, uh, which is now renamed the District of Contamination. Uh, the Japanese launched a ground invasion of the U.S. West Coast because DC got destroyed with Congress and the White House and everybody in it. The American federal government subsequently surrenders. It takes another year for the Axis and their American collaborators to pacify the country. The Germans build concentration camps for the enslavement and eventual extermination of Jewish Americans and African Americans and commit massacres in cities such as Cincinnati. By 1962, the German Reich extends to Europe and Africa, and the Empire of Japan comprises Asia and Oceania. But most of the series is set in the former U.S. And in Germany proper. Adolf Hitler is still the dictator of the German Reich, and the Empire of Japan rules most of the rest of the world. Although the real world axis includes fascist Italy under the dictatorship of Benito Mussolini, only the Japanese and the German factions of the axis are depicted. There are no Italians in this scenario, nor is Mussolini accounted for, except for an image in one of the mysterious newsreels with the Fuhrer part of the Empire of Japan, Western North America, the Japanese Pacific states. It's occupied by a technologically less advanced Showa era Empire of Japan, which has imposed its hierarchical society on the parts of the former United States. The empire treats non-Japanese as subjects with fewer rights and low prospects of advancement in imperial society. So again, a little different from the book. Although some upper-class Japanese are fascinated with pre-war American culture, so the same. Japan's trade and science ministers work in the Pacific States capital of San Francisco. The Yakuza wield extensive influence in Japanese America, are largely tolerated by the Kempeitai. In season four, an organization calling itself the Black Communist Rebellion takes up arms against the Japanese, gaining ground as the empire strengthens, wanes. So in the book, not so much, but in the television series, the Japanese are losing their Cold War. Um, in the book, it's not really defined that way, because the Germans are in the book, the Germans are still fighting the Russians, but in like Siberia. Eastern and Midwestern North America is a colony controlled by the greater Nazi Reich under the aging Hitler, headed by a Reichsmarschall of North America. It is commonly referred to as Nazi America or the American Reich, and its capital is New York City, which survived the war invasion largely intact. The Nazis continue to hunt minorities and kill the physically and mentally ill. Fictional developments of the 1960s technology, such as video phones, live surveillance video, and supersonic jetliners, that were technologically available in the 1960s but never commercially produced, are seen in the series. Japan and Germany have left the Rocky Mountains to serve as a buffer zone. So it's the same in the book, although it's a much smaller buffer zone. Texas isn't part of it, whereas in the book, it's the Mississippi to the Rockies is the ungoverned zone. But there is a Cold War going on with the Japanese and the Germans. But in the case of the television series, the Japanese are losing. Um, there is no substantial government, economy, or armed forces in the neutral zone. It's left to fend for itself while the two rival empires pursue their ambitions. Resistance groups use the neutral zone as a haven, and the Germans and the Japanese intermittently send spies into the region, both to monitor the neutral zone and each other. Um, so we got 10, 20, we got 40 episodes of the television series altogether. And I kind of wish they'd have done a fifth season. I'm gonna be honest. It kind of left me wanting more. Um,
It,
there should have been more going on in the neutral zone
it,
because in the book, the neutral zone figures pretty heavily.
the TV show ends abruptly.
Mhm.
I really liked the TV show. I've read both the book and seen the TV show, and I really liked the TV show except for the last episode. The very last episode, just I was just like, no, this ended terribly. It was very rushed, and it left too much out there. The last episode of the TV series ruined the series for me, because I really, really liked it up until that point. Um, I love most of the actors in the TV series. I think they're one of the actors that's in there that he's a funny looking guy, but I think he's a really good actor is DJ Qualls. I
Yeah,
think
I love
he's a
DJ
really
Qualls.
good actor. He's just a funny looking guy. Rufus Sewell as John Smith is amazing.
Yeah,
He is absolutely amazing.
yeah. In
Uh,
in every iteration of the character he plays.
yes, yes,
Because he's just like a suburban dad who fought in the war in one reality. In another reality, he's a Reichsmarshal. Yeah,
yeah. Um, it just overall, the TV series well worth a watch, but just understand that the last episode is going to end very abruptly and unusually.
yeah. And
Um,
honestly, it almost looked like they were opening themselves up for a fifth season. They just didn't get it.
yeah, and I think they were, but it got canceled because it didn't have the high viewership that they wanted. It started to wane, and a
Hmm.
lot of that is because The Man in the High Castle is a slow burn.
Yeah, it is.
You got to stick with it. The book is
It's
phenomenal.
PKD
Yeah, the book is
because PKD's like
phenomenal.
that. Yeah.
Um, you know, here's what I would like to see because with how well I think they did most of The Man in the High Castle, the TV series. I've talked about this series before. I would love to see this as a series is Harry Turtledove's World War series.
Hmm.
His alternate history where in the middle of World War II an alien invasion happens.
Oh yeah.
And completely changes the war.
Oh yeah.
Completely changes the war. That's incredible. And it's honestly, as far as book goes, it's in the same vein as this.
Yeah.
It's very, very good, and it's a lot of books. I think it's like 5 or 6 books
Yeah.
for the
And they're
World War
thick
series.
too.
They're very thick.
A lot of
Um,
characters. And you even get some alien characters who are
hmm.
who, who are uh sympathetic.
Yeah, yeah. So check out Harry Turtledove, the World War series. I wish someone would pick that up and do a series on it. But as far as this one, I highly recommend reading the book before the TV series.
Hmm.
Enjoy how it's really supposed to end, and then watch the TV series, knowing that the end of the TV series is going to kind of make you go, no.
Yeah, they miss some stuff. The
Yes.
thing I did like about the television series is they actually, because I don't think in the book they actually explained how they were getting the stuff back and forth.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
Yeah, so in the television series, it's like, oh, somebody opened up a tunnel.
Yeah.
Some scientist opened up a tunnel in between worlds to try to save the world, and now it's just a place to bring stuff through.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, excellent book.
Yeah,
Excellent book. I mean,
excellent book.
it's Philip K. Dick. Philip K. Dick is great. He's awesome. He's amazing.
Yeah, we
Um,
discussed PKD a few times.
yes. I mean, do androids dream of electric sheep? I believe we did an episode
Yeah.
specifically over that.
Hmm.
Um, because that's the impetus for Blade Runner.
Hmm.
But Philip K. Dick is a very good writer. The whole premise of The Man in the High Castle is great. God, last time I read that was, this is 2026, 30 years ago. I read that book 30 years ago.
I read it more recently than that, but I was before the series came out. I know that, so at least 10 years.
Yeah, I was very excited when the series came out because I wanted to see it, and and like I said, I watched every single episode and absolutely loved it. Just the ending, just forewarning, is just gonna kind of leave you on a lurch,
You're gonna be
and
like, what? What? Okay,
yeah,
what's next? Oh no,
right,
there is no next.
right, right. So that was the disappointing thing, about that. And there's some shows that are going to do that. 11/22/63, which is Stephen King and what I consider one of the best books ever written. They came out with the series,
Hmm.
and the series started off very well, but then it seemed to lose its way. And the very last episode of 11/22/63 literally feels like they fired every writer who was on the show and brought in a whole new pack and said, "Yeah, figure it out."
Get figured
And
out.
they just threw something together.
Yeah,
Um, Ended up ruining that one for me. But this
yeah,
is
which
this
was a
is
really good. That was a good premise too.
yes, yes, that's another alternate history one. The main character in that, it goes back in time, finds a way to go back in time to stop the JFK assassination. Brilliant book. The book is absolutely brilliant, and I
Oh
love the
yeah,
fact that
but
Stephen. I love the fact that Stephen King came to DFW and researched the
Hmm.
area before he wrote about it, which was really cool.
It, what's great about that particular piece, in both the book and the television series, is that if you go back, everything resets. So it's a
Well, what he's talking about is the main character is able to go back and forth. He'll go back in time and then he's able to come back to modern day. But when he goes back again, everything he did before has reset.
yep,
So he basically uses that as the video game reset button. When he screws something up, he comes back through the door and then goes
yeah.
back to try again.
And he's not close to 1963. He's like 3 years away.
Yeah, he's 3 years before 1963, and so he's got that amount of time, and
Yeah.
he has to
Yeah, and
fix
when he
everything.
resets it, he's got to go back. And what's really sad is in the world, in our modern world, the amount of time that elapses is 2 minutes.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, it's a cool premise. But anyway, back to this one. It's a great book. It is a good series.
Mhm.
I don't want to discount that. I don't want to make anybody think that the TV series was not good because it was very good. I think it won awards.
Yeah,
I think it won some awards.
I love Stephen Root in that. Stephen Root playing the man in the high castle.
Yeah, yeah. But I highly recommend reading the book first. Highly
Hmm.
recommend it. Don't watch the TV show first. Read the book.
Yeah, read the
Those of
book
you out
first.
there that don't read a whole lot of books, well, go fix that and go
Yeah,
read the book.
read this one.
Yeah, yeah, cool, good stuff, man. I like this. I like that we covered that. I think, yeah, no, it's great, great stuff.
Well, thanks, sir.
Sweet. With that, we will step over to the murdery side of the house.
Murder.
For today, I got my information off Wikipedia, the Arizona Republic, CBS News, NBC News, ABC News, the New York Times, AZ Central, and 12 News Phoenix. And this is the story of Bryan Patrick Miller.
Bryan Patrick Miller.
Um, some serial killers, honestly, that we've talked about, um, they announce themselves. Their crimes are very fast. Their presence is felt immediately, and fear spreads because people know something is wrong. But not every killer works that way. Some just leave behind a single moment of violence and then they just disappear into time. Um, Arizona in the early 1990s, this was not a place that was on the edge. There were no warnings, no task forces. There wasn't a sense that something was unfolding beneath the surface. And two young women would be murdered a year apart. Their bodies were left in canals and their cases investigated, documented, then quietly filed away. There's no suspect and no arrest, and for more than 2 decades, nothing happened. So I'm continuing back in my A to Z journey across America's serial killers, and today we're in Arizona. And this is not a story about panic. Um, it's a story about silence. And when I say panic, when the word comes out that there may be a serial killer, people do start to panic. There's a little bit of that going on right now in Austin, Texas, because they think they may have a serial killer in Austin, Texas.
Hmm.
I've kind of been following that. But yeah, this is about silence and really how time itself became the most powerful thing that stood between a killer and accountability. In the early 90s, Arizona was growing. Phoenix and its surrounding communities were expanding rapidly. There were new neighborhoods, new roads, new people arriving every year. Funny is that I was one of those people having moved to Phoenix in the early 90s for a fresh start.
That's right.
Um, my brief stint into back to Arizona where I'm from. Um,
You were there for what? Like a year?
yeah, I was there for a year and then I came back. I missed Texas and I wanted to be back. Um, but it's a place back then. It was defined by movement and change and not stagnation. Crime existed; it always does in large cities, but there was no singular threat that dominated headlines. There wasn't a sense that a serial predator was really kind of operating quietly in the background. Um, Law enforcement agencies worked their cases largely in isolation. Databases were limited, and information being shared across jurisdictions was very slow and inconsistent. DNA evidence existed at this time, but it was still in its early stages. They did collect samples and they preserved them, but matching them to a suspect back then was often impossible unless that person was already in the system, and that matters. Um, when crimes occur in that type of environment, they're evaluated as individual events, not pieces of a larger picture. And when nothing obvious connects them, time just moves on. And that's the world that Arizona was in when the first body was found. It was a world that was not really prepared to recognize what it was looking at. In 1992, the body of Angela Broso was discovered in the Phoenix area. She was 21 years old. Her body was found in a canal, and this, which is an environment that immediately complicated the investigation because water degrades evidence. Currents
Yes.
move object around, and time becomes harder to measure. What they did know is Angela had been severely beaten, and the injuries were extensive, and there were indications of sexual assault. This left investigators with a crime scene that offered very little to hold on to. There were no witnesses who could place anyone with her, no clear timeline of when she was last seen alive, and no suspect that stood out. At the time, there was no reason to believe this murder was part of anything larger, and so it was treated as a single tragic act of violence. Investigators did what they could with the tools available to them. Evidence was collected, DNA was preserved, but preserving DNA in the 90s didn't mean solving a case. It just meant waiting. So Angela Brosso's murder went unsolved, and without a second crime to connect it to, it just joined the list of long list of cold cases that never make headlines again. And so the city moved on. Unfortunately for Angela's family, it did not. A year later, in 1993, another body was found. This time it was Melanie Furness. Melanie was 17 years old. Her body was also discovered in a canal, and like Angela, she had been beaten. There were also signs of sexual assault, and just like Angela, there were no witnesses who could identify a suspect. Similarities were there, but they weren't obvious to police enough yet. They were different ages, different locations, different years. Different jurisdictions handled the cases, and communication between these agencies were limited, as I said. So investigators did not immediately connect the two murders. There was no serial killer task force and no shared database flagging similarities in real time. And so each case just existed in its own file. Once again, DNA was collected and preserved, and once again, there was no match. And so again, time went on. Two young women had been murdered, two families were left without answers. And at this point, Arizona did not realize it was dealing with a serial killer. Looking back now, though, the murders should have been obvious. Both were young women, both were beaten, both sexually assaulted, and both in canals. In the 90s, though, these similarities were not enough to trigger alarms. The crimes occurred a year apart and happened in different parts of Phoenix. Different investigative teams handled them, and most importantly, there was nothing tying them to a specific suspect. And really, kind of what often gets lost in unsolved cases like this is who the victims were before they became evidence. Angela Broso wasn't just a name in a file or a set of injuries described in a report. She was 21 years old. She had plans. She had people who expected to hear from her again, and people who assumed her absence would only be temporary. Melanie, again, was 17, still a teenager. She was still in the stage of life where the future seemed wide open rather than fragile. Not even old enough to vote, not old enough to drink, but old enough to have her life taken from her. Neither woman was living in the margins. That made their disappearance inevitable. They were not transients. They were not anonymous. But once their cases went cold, they slowly kind of became defined as how they died rather than how they lived. And this matters because when cases go unsolved for decades, victims are often remembered only through crime photos and forensic descriptions. Their identities at that point kind of flatten and their stories shrink. For the family, that loss compounds. First, they lose the person, and over time, they lose the public memory of who that person was. Angela and Melanie didn't disappear because they were invisible. They became invisible because nothing about their cases forced the system to keep looking. At the time, law enforcement relied heavily on patterns that were loud and repetitive, killers who struck frequently, killers who stayed in one area, and killers who left signatures. Brian Patrick Miller did none of these things. He didn't rush, he didn't escalate quickly, and he didn't stay visible. So without a suspect and without a third crime to force connection, these cases remain separate, and each investigation reached the same frustrating point. Evidence existed, but it wasn't saying anything. So both cases go cold, But cold cases don't mean abandoned. They just mean unresolved. They store files away, evidence is cataloged, and families are told if anything new comes up, they'll be contacted. But often these months will turn into years and the calls stop coming. For Angela's family, this silence stretched on, and for Melanie's, it did too, and life just continued for everybody else. The city grew, technology advanced, and officers retired, and the person responsible for both murders lived free in the same community where the crimes occurred. Um, and this is really where the hardest truth about cold cases, long-term cold cases, come into play. The killer does not freeze in time the way the investigation does. They just move on. Cold cases do not sit untouched for decades. They just kind of exist. Almost like in a case of suspended animation, evidence is boxed, labeled, and stored according to protocols. Once was considered cutting edge becomes outdated, and what was once preserved is later re-examined to see if it still meets modern standard. Detectives rotate in and out, detectives retire, they pass files on to people who never worked the original scene, and then families just kind of live with uncertainty. Every few years in these cold cases, a call will come in or it doesn't. Every few years, hope briefly reappears or it doesn't. And for Angela and Melanie, their cases really kind of lived very quietly in this space. They were not reopened because of new crimes. They were reopened because science eventually gave investigators a reason to look again. Until that point, the question was never who did this, it was will we ever know? For decades, Brian Patrick Miller was not a name anyone recognized. He lived in the Phoenix area. He worked, he interacted with coworkers and neighbors. There were no public warnings attached to him, no violent criminal record that set off alarms. To the people around him, he was a very unremarkable person, and that's why he lasted so long without being caught. Serial killers don't always hide behind charm or manipulation. Sometimes they hide by just being ordinary. And for more than 20 years, um,
Beige
Brian,
and vanilla.
yes. And this is what Brian Miller did for more than 20 years. He went about his life while there were families out there waiting for answers. And really, the only thing standing between him and accountability was time. The DNA sat collected for both crime scenes in storage, and it wasn't ignored, it just couldn't be used. In the early 90s, DNA evidence could only confirm or exclude a suspect, but only if investigators had someone to test it against. Without a suspect, those samples go nowhere.
Mhm.
What began to change was the advances in forensic sciences, which transformed DNA from a passive record into an active investigation tool. There was genetic genealogy, which made it possible to compare crime scene DNA to not just known offenders, but to distant relatives who had voluntarily submitted their genetic information to public databases. This is a really cool thing about DNA that we
This
have
is
today.
why 23andMe is important and you don't realize it. When
Yes,
you sign up for it, you agree that your stuff will go into a database. So it's not that they're necessarily looking for you, but someone you could loosely be related to could be a perpetrator of a crime. Someone you
yes,
probably have never even met, but
right.
because you submitted your DNA, they can piece it out.
And we have a lot of cases that have been solved because of this since the advances. It's not fast, it's not simple, and it's not
No,
guaranteed
no.
because genetic genealogy doesn't work like you see on TV. There's no instant match and no blinking cursor that suddenly goes, "Hey, John Smith."
It
Um,
would be nice if it did.
it would be, but what investigators often get first is exactly what you talked about: a distant relative, a cousin, a second cousin, someone who shares just a fraction of DNA, but has no idea that a crime is even being investigated. Just like
Yeah.
you said. From there, forensics analysts build family trees manually. They go through birth records, marriage records, public databases, obituaries. Entire branches are mapped and then ruled out. This is a process that can take years.
Years.
And where it can collapse is if at any point the trail goes cold or the data isn't sufficient. In Brian Miller's case, investigators had to be certain before moving forward because once an arrest is made decades after a crime, there's no margin for error. The case
Mm-mm.
lives or dies on forensic certainty at that point. And that's why the arrest didn't come sooner, and really why when it did, it was definitive. Science didn't guess, it proved. Investigators had to re-examine preserved evidence, confirm the samples were still viable, build family trees from partial genetic matches, and narrow this tree down branch by branch. And let's talk about those samples for a second. There's only so many samples you can take from DNA. You will eventually run out. I have read cases where they were literally on the last piece
Yeah,
of the
because when
sample
you
they could
sequence it,
use.
you destroy it.
Yeah,
When you sequence it, you destroy it.
yeah. So that's very important. So this ended up kind of becoming the culmination of years of work that was quietly unfolding, and then slowly a name began to emerge. In 2015, which was more than 2 decades after the murders of Angela and Melanie, Bryan Patrick Miller was arrested. He wasn't arrested after a chase. He wasn't arrested after a tip. He was arrested because science finally caught up with him. Investigators obtained a direct DNA sample, and it matched the evidence from both crime scenes. For the families, the arrest came after years of silence, but for Bryan Miller, it came after years of freedom. He lived more years free than his victims were ever allowed to live. At his trial, prosecutors laid out a case built almost entirely on forensics evidence. DNA tied Miller to both murders. The similarities between the crimes were finally examined together, and patterns that had once been invisible became undeniable. The defense challenged the timeline. They questioned the use of genetic genealogy. They attempted to cast doubt on decades old evidence. However, once the jury heard the full story, not just of the murders, but of the long wait that followed them, in 2018, Bryan Patrick Miller was convicted of both murders. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, which means there would be no release and no return to the life he had quietly lived. And this is kind of where one of the hardest moments of the case are. It's not just the verdict, it's the realization that accountability arrived in a world that's already moved on.
Mhm.
Angela and Melanie did not get to see justice served. Their families did. But for the families, this verdict doesn't erase the loss. It doesn't give back the years that have passed, but it does do something important. It answered the question that lingered for more than 2 decades. Who did this?
Who did this?
Bryan Patrick Miller did not terrorize Arizona loudly. He didn't announce himself. He didn't escalate quickly, and he didn't leave messages behind. He just waited. And for a long time, so did Arizona. And this is where cases like this that remind us that silence doesn't mean safety and time doesn't equal justice. Some of the most dangerous offenders are the ones who give the system nothing obvious to react to. Um, in this, for more than 2 decades, two murders sat unresolved, not because they were forgotten, but because the tools needed to solve them didn't exist. Evidence, thankfully, was preserved and files were kept, and the families were told to wait. And sadly, they did.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
we are just damn lucky that he stopped.
yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I didn't read anywhere that there was anything else attributed to him on this. Um, it's just justice finally came. It didn't arrive quick, but it came scientifically and methodically, but unfortunately far too late to undo the
Mhm.
damage. Um, so this was our continuation in my A to Z journey across America's serial killers. Arizona really kind of stands as a reminder that not every story unfolds in real time, and crimes don't reveal themselves through panic or repetition. Some of them hide in the gap between events, and some are only solved because the future finally learns how to read the past. That's the great thing about DNA. So next time, when I move forward to the next date, we'll cover another chapter in America's long and complicated history with serial violence. And that's the story of Bryan Patrick Miller.
Well, thank you, sir.
I'm loving this A to Z across
Yeah,
America.
yeah, yeah. I kind of digging this too. I also like that you're taking a break. Everyone, hell, I'm going to do this one, and then we're going to go back to A to Z.
Yeah, every now and then I will. I'll keep going. I mean, this gives me 50 weeks
Yeah.
of show, and I'll keep going. But yeah, every now and then I'm going to have a pause, and there I'll have a break because something's going to come across my desk, and I'm going to go, yeah, I need to cover that one.
Yeah, yeah, you cover that.
Yeah.
Kids, I'm gonna give a peek behind the curtain. When we were first conceiving of this show 5 years ago, go ahead at the release of this, yeah, 5 years ago,
Hmm?
um, we were worried we weren't gonna have enough stuff after like 50 episodes. Yeah, no, we're good.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're
I
good.
I, I thought I definitely thought I would run out of stuff, but I certainly haven't. I've discovered so much more since I started this, more
Uh-huh.
podcasts, more books, all kinds of things, databases out there about these, and it just sometimes baffles my mind that 243 episodes later, I still have cases to cover,
No,
and
no,
it's not slowing.
no, no.
I still have plenty to go. Um, but yeah, thank you for staying with me on another A to Z. As I said, I'm really enjoying that. I'm going to keep going with this, and I hope our listeners are enjoying it as well. Give us a shout out. Tell us what
Yeah.
you think. Our contact
You're
info.
like, hurry up and get to my state. I want to see what's next.
Yeah, because I'll get there for everybody. Um, but you can reach out to us. That will take us to the end of another recording week on our webpage, nerderymurdery.com. You will find our email addresses. If you ever want to reach out to us, please do. We've had
Yeah.
several listeners reach out, ask various questions. We currently have somebody that reached out that wants to talk to Trey Cadenhead that we had on an episode
Yes.
way, way back. Um, which I thought was really cool. So do reach out to us. We do answer. Love to hear recommendations of things you want to hear. But yeah, check us out, nerdarymurder.com. You'll also find links there to our YouTube page, which Zig so often updates.
Yeah, definitely check this one out because there's a couple of YouTube videos about the book and then about the television series, and you can kind of gauge the differences yourself. Because they're subtle, but they're definitely there.
Standing. Appreciate all the work you do on that.
Thanks, sir.
You can also find the link to our merchandise page, or if you wish to show off your Nerdery and Murdery fandom, please do consider something from there. We've got some really cool stuff on there, and hey, let's be honest about it. You look damn good in it.
Damn good.
Damn good. You can also find the link to our Patreon, where if you wish to become a patron, that along with our merchandise does help with the costs that are associated with our show. It costs to keep us on the air for our storage, for our uploads, and everything that's associated with that. It's not cheap, it's not free, and we do appreciate each and every one of you.
Please and thank you.
Please and thank you. One other thing you can do that helps us and is completely free for you, and actually two other things. But the first thing is leave a 5-star review wherever you can. It really helps us and helps others find our content that may be looking for the information we discuss. And you can also follow and like us on Facebook, on TikTok, on YouTube. Our page is there. There's more information. You'll see stuff that we produce that are associated around the show. So give those a like as well. That helps the algorithm, helps others find us. And if you're really enjoying the show, please tell somebody else. Let somebody else know that you love this show and they should be listening to it too, because you can't discount how powerful word of mouth is from somebody who is familiar to you.
That is right.
And last, but certainly not least, as always, to our good friend Chuck, you can go sleep now.
Good night, Chuck.
Good night, Chuck. Yeah, especially because I'm not golfing with you today, so you can go sleep now. With that,
I have been Zig with your nerdery.
and I'm Jeffrey with your murdering.
Cue the music.